Some people wait until everything works out before they say thank you. But faith doesn't operate like that. Faith praises when the account is low, when the doctor hasn't called back, when the door still looks closed. Thanking God in advance means you trust His character more than your circumstances. It means you believe God is already in tomorrow while you're still stuck in today. Praise before the proof is not noise, it's confidence. It says, I may not see it yet, but I know who's handling it. That kind of praise confuses fear and strengthens belief. When you thank God early, you're not pretending things are perfect. You're declaring that God is bigger than what you see. You're saying my situation is real, but my God is more real. Praise becomes your posture, not your reaction. You don't wait for the breakthrough to lift your hands. You lift your hands because you know the breakthrough is coming. That's how faith walks into the room. Most people praise when the storm passes. Faith praises while the rain is still falling. That's when heaven pays attention, because now your praise isn't based on results. It's based on trust. It's based on relationship. It's based on knowing God hasn't failed you yet. When you praise early, you shift your focus. You stop staring at what's missing, and you start remembering who's present. God doesn't need you to understand the process. He needs you to trust the promise, and praise is proof that you do. Praise before the proof strengthens you. It keeps your heart from breaking under pressure. It reminds your soul that this moment is temporary and God's power is permanent. When you praise early, you don't fall apart, you stand firm, because you already know how the story ends. Every thank you before it happens is an act of faith. Every praise in the waiting season is a seed. And seeds always grow underground first. You don't see it, but something is happening. God is responding to your trust. God is honoring your faith. God is already moving. So thank God now. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because faith speaks first, and evidence follows later. And God responds to people who believe Him before they see Him. Gratitude is not a feeling. It's a decision. You decide to thank God even when emotions say don't. You decide to trust when logic says wait. That kind of gratitude tells heaven you believe God is faithful. It says, I trust you even when I don't understand you. And trust always gets God's attention. When you thank God in advance, you're making a statement. You're saying, I believe. You're working even if I can't track it. You're saying, I don't need proof to believe because my history with you is enough. That's not denial, that's confidence. Some people think gratitude means everything is fine, but real gratitude shows up when things are not fine. When you thank God in the middle of confusion, you're saying, I trust your plan more than my comfort. You're saying, I trust your timing more than my urgency. And that kind of trust builds strength. Gratitude changes how you carry the weight. The problem may still be there, but it no longer controls your peace, because now you've placed it in God's hands. And once it's in His hands, it's no longer your burden to carry alone. Trust doesn't mean you won't have questions. It means you won't let questions stop your faith. You can be confused and still be grateful. You can be hurting and still be thankful. Because gratitude says, I know God is still good, even when life doesn't feel good. When gratitude becomes your language, fear loses its voice, doubt gets quieter, and hope gets louder, because what you focus on grows. And when you focus on God, your faith grows stronger. Gratitude is proof that you believe the outcome is settled. You're thanking God because you trust the ending. You don't need to see the whole picture. You just need to know who's painting it. And God has never messed up a masterpiece. If you look back long enough, you'll find moments you shouldn't have survived, situations that should have destroyed you, doors that should have stayed closed, and storms that should have taken you out. But somehow you're still here. That's not luck. Your past is filled with quiet miracles, moments God stepped in without announcing Himself, times when things worked out you can't explain, and seasons where you were protected without knowing it. That's evidence. That's consistency. That's God. When doubt shows up, your past should speak up. It should remind you that God has a track record. He didn't start blessing you today. He's been covering you for years. You just didn't always recognize it. But now you know better. God doesn't change with circumstances. People do, situations do, emotions do. But God stays the same. The same God who carried you then is the same God carrying you now. Every battle you survived built your testimony. Every setback strengthened your faith. Every delay taught you patience. And every breakthrough proved God's timing. You didn't make it this far by accident. You were carried. You were guided. When fear tells you this time is different, your past says God is still faithful. When doubt says it won't work, your past says God already did it before. And if he did it then, he can do it again, because God doesn't run out of power. Your memory should fuel your faith, not trap you in regret. If God brought you through what you've already faced, there is nothing in front of you that's too big, nothing that's too heavy, nothing that's too complicated. So when you thank God in advance, you're not guessing, you're remembering, you're saying, I've seen you move before, and I trust you to move again, because my past proves you always show up. Pressure reveals what you really believe. When things are calm, anyone can speak faith, but when stress hits, when answers delay, when life tightens the grip, that's when real faith shows itself. Faith doesn't panic when pressure increases. Faith gets quieter and more focused. It doesn't rush God. It doesn't complain about timing. It keeps moving forward even when progress feels slow. Under pressure, fear gets loud, but faith speaks with authority. Faith says God is still in control. Even if everything feels unstable, faith refuses to let circumstances dictate belief, because faith knows who's in charge. When pressure comes, faith doesn't say, why me? Faith says God is teaching me. Faith doesn't say I'm done. Faith says I'm growing, because pressure produces strength, and strength produces endurance. Faith under pressure chooses praise, not because it feels good, but because it works. Praise keeps your mind steady. Praise keeps your heart open. Praise keeps you from giving up too soon. When life squeezes you, whatever is inside you comes out. And if faith is inside you, trust will come out, hope will come out, praise will come out, even when it hurts. Faith talks different because it sees struggle, it sees further. It doesn't just see the struggle lessen, it sees the purpose, it sees the victory ahead, even if it hasn't arrived yet. So keep speaking faith, especially when pressure tries to silence you, because pressure doesn't mean God left. It means something is being formed, and faith knows God is still working. Waiting doesn't mean God said no. It means God said not yet. And not yet doesn't cancel the promise. It protects it, because timing matters. And God knows what you're not ready for yet. Delays build character. They teach patience. They strengthen trust. And they prepare you for responsibility. If God gave you everything immediately, you might mishandle it or miss the lesson. Sometimes God delays to protect you, to keep you from something that looks good but isn't good for you. Sometimes the wait is saving you from regret, from pain, from loss. Waiting seasons are working seasons. Even when it feels quiet, God is arranging things behind the scenes, aligning people, shifting situations, removing obstacles you never even saw. When you rush God, you risk missing his best, because his timing includes wisdom, and wisdom always sees what emotion can't. God is not slow, he's strategic. Delays teach you to trust God without control. They teach you to walk by faith, not by sight. They remind you that God's plan is bigger than your schedule and stronger than your impatience. If God promised it, he will perform it. The delay doesn't cancel it. The delay prepares it, and while you're waiting, God is working on you. So thank God even in the delay, because waiting is not rejection. Waiting is preparation. And when the time is right, what God does will be worth the wait. There comes a moment when you've done all you can. You've tried, you've planned, you've pushed, and nothing is moving. That's not failure. That's the setup. God often waits until you reach your limit, because as long as you think you can fix it, you won't fully trust him with it. But when your strength runs out, God's strength steps in. Admitting you can't do it anymore is not weakness. It's honesty, and honesty invites help. God doesn't need you to be strong. He needs you to be willing to let go, willing to trust. When you stop forcing outcomes, God starts forming solutions. When you stop controlling everything, God starts directing everything, because surrender creates space, And space allows God to move. God works best when you're tired, when you're unsure, when you're out of options, because now you're listening, now you're depending, now you're open. Your limitations don't limit God. They reveal Him. They give Him room to show His power. They give Him room to show His faithfulness, and they remind you that you were never meant to do life alone. When God steps in, things shift without struggle, doors open without force, answers come without strain, because what you couldn't do in your strength, God can do effortlessly. So stop blaming yourself for being tired. That's often the moment God has been waiting for, because when you can't, God can, and God always comes through. Gratitude changes the room. It changes the mood. It changes your mindset. When you choose to be thankful, even in difficulty, you shift the atmosphere around you. Thankfulness doesn't ignore problems. It puts them in perspective. It reminds you that trouble is temporary, but God's presence is constant. And where God is present, peace can exist. When you thank God, your spirit lifts, your mind clears, your heart softens, because gratitude opens your eyes to what's still good. Even when things are hard, atmospheres respond to attitude. When you complain, you invite heaviness. When you're grateful, you invite peace. And peace gives you clarity. Clarity gives you strength. Thankfulness invites God into the situation, not because He wasn't there, but because you're now aware of Him, and awareness changes everything. You stop feeling alone. You stop feeling overwhelmed. Gratitude reminds you that this moment doesn't define you. That struggle is not your identity. That difficulty is not your destiny. God still has the final say. When the atmosphere changes, so does your response. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding spiritually. You become steadier, stronger, more hopeful. So choose thankfulness, not because life is easy, but because God is present, and wherever God is, something can change, even if it hasn't changed yet. Faith is not passive. Faith moves. Faith steps forward even when unsure. Faith doesn't just talk about belief. Faith lives like it believes, and action proves what words claim. If you believe God will do it, you prepare for it. You show up expecting it. You move like it's already on the way, because real faith aligns behavior with belief. Faith wakes up early. Faith stays consistent. Faith keeps trying, even when results are slow, because faith knows obedience matters, even when outcomes are delayed. When you act in faith, you're saying, I trust God enough to move, even without guarantees, even without clarity, even without full understanding. That's real belief. Action doesn't mean you're not scared. It means fear doesn't control you. It means you move anyway. Because God didn't promise comfort. He promised presence. Faith-filled action opens doors. It creates opportunities. It positions you for favor. God responds to movement, because movement shows trust, and trust invites increase. You can't say you believe and live like you don't. Faith and fear can't drive at the same time. One has to sit in the passenger seat, and faith works best when it's in control. So live like you believe, walk like it's already happening, prepare like God already answered, because faith without action is empty, and God honors faith that moves. Your problem looks big because you're human, but it's small compared to God. Nothing you're dealing with has ever overwhelmed Him or caught Him by surprise. God has seen harder situations. He's handled worse cases. He solved more complicated problems than the one stressing you right now, and He did it with ease. When you magnify the problem, fear grows. When you magnify God, faith grows. What you focus on determines what controls you, and God deserves the focus. Your struggle is temporary. God is eternal. Your challenge has limits. God has none. So no matter how heavy it feels, it's still lighter than God's power. Problems shout, God whispers. But whispers carry authority, because God doesn't need to raise His voice to change everything. He just needs permission. When you put your problem next to God, it shrinks, it loses power, it loses control, because now you remember who you're dealing with. Stop telling God how big the problem is and start reminding yourself how big God is, because perspective changes everything and God is still greater. So thank God in advance, not because the problem disappeared, but because you know it's not bigger than God, and it never was. Silence doesn't mean inactivity. Just because you don't hear anything doesn't mean nothing is happening. God works quietly, strategically, perfectly. While you wait, God is arranging conversations, moving hearts, opening paths you don't see, closing doors that would have hurt you, protecting you without announcement behind closed doors. God is aligning timing, preparing people, setting conditions. That must be right before the door opens. Sometimes God keeps things hidden so you don't get distracted, so you don't rush, so you don't interfere. Because what he's building requires patience, silence tests trust. It forces you to believe without updates, to praise without evidence, to wait without guarantees. And that kind of trust builds maturity. God doesn't need to explain himself. To be faithful, he doesn't need to show you everything. To be working, your job is not to see. Your job is to trust. Every closed door has a reason. Every delay has a purpose. And every quiet season has unseen progress. God wastes nothing. So don't lose faith in the silence, because God is still working, still arranging, still preparing. And when the door opens, you'll understand why it had to stay closed. Real praise isn't always loud. Sometimes it's whispered through tears. Sometimes it's silent trust. Sometimes it's just holding on. When everything feels heavy, praising while it hurts means you trust God beyond feelings. You don't praise because it feels good. You praise because God is good, even when life doesn't feel fair. Pain doesn't cancel praise, it deepens it. Because now your praise is costly, and costly praise carries power. It says, I still believe, even when I'm hurting. God sees praise that comes from broken places. He hears faith that trembles, and he honors trust that survives pain. Because that kind of faith is real, and real faith moves heaven. Praise keeps bitterness from growing. It keeps anger from taking root. It keeps despair from winning, because praise reminds you that pain is temporary and God is present. You don't have to hide the hurt. God knows it's there. Praise doesn't deny pain. It declares hope. It says, this hurts, but it won't last forever. So praise even when it hurts, because pain is not the end, and your praise is proof that you still believe God is working. Even now, obedience isn't always comfortable, but it's always powerful. Doing what's right when it's hard positions you for favor. You didn't earn. God responds to obedience, even when no one sees it, even when it costs you, even when it feels unfair, because obedience proves trust. Sometimes the blessing is delayed, not because God forgot, but because obedience is still being tested. God wants to know, can he trust you? Before he rewards you, obedience shapes character, it builds discipline. It strengthens integrity, and integrity sustains blessings. When they arrive, God cares about longevity. When you obey, you align yourself with God's plan, and alignment brings protection, direction, and peace even before the breakthrough. Disobedience may feel easier, but it costs more. Obedience may feel harder, but it pays better, because God blesses what aligns with him. Every step of obedience moves you closer to what God promised. Even if you don't see it yet, God is keeping count. God is watching. God is preparing. So keep doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. Because obedience opens doors you didn't knock on, and blessings you didn't chase. Faith doesn't quit when it gets tired. It rests and keeps going. Faith doesn't stop because it's hard. It adjusts and continues, because quitting would interrupt what God is doing. Most breakthroughs are close. When people give up, the pressure increases, the resistance grows, because something is about to break, and faith stays the course. Faith understands that consistency matters, showing up matters, trying again matters. Even when progress feels invisible, God sees every step. Quitting feels tempting when results are slow, when energy is low, when disappointment builds. But faith remembers why it started. God didn't bring you this far to leave you here. He didn't build your faith to let it fail now. Every delay has purpose. Every struggle has meaning. Faith doesn't need motivation. It needs conviction, a decision to trust God, no matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it gets. When you refuse to quit, you show God that you trust him fully, and God honors perseverance, because endurance produces reward, and faith keeps going. So stay in it, stay believing, stay trusting, because quitting now would stop what God already started. And God always finishes his work. If God did it earlier, you wouldn't be ready. If he delayed it longer, you'd miss it. God's timing is precise, and precision protects you. Timing determines sustainability, not just success. God doesn't just want to bless you, He wants the blessing to last, and timing ensures stability. Sometimes what you want now would overwhelm you, confuse you, or distract you. So God waits until you can handle it. God's timing considers everything: your growth, your healing, your maturity, and the people involved, because rushing ruins things. When God says wait, it's not punishment, it's protection. He's keeping you from harm, from regret, from unnecessary pain. Trusting God's timing requires humility. It means admitting God knows better, even when you don't like the wait, even when it's uncomfortable. When the time is right, nothing can stop it. Doors open effortlessly, provision shows up, peace comes with it, because God aligned everything. So thank God for the timing, even when it's slow, because when God does it, it will be right, it will be ready, and it will last. Words shape direction. What you speak, you reinforce, and what you repeat, you begin to believe. Your mouth has power. Speaking victory doesn't mean lying. It means aligning with faith. It means choosing hope over fear and belief over doubt. Even when evidence is missing, life follows language. If you keep speaking defeat, your mindset follows. But when you speak victory, your faith rises and your focus sharpens. Speak what you believe God will do, not what fear suggests. Your words should match your faith, not your frustration, because faith-filled words build momentum. Victory talk strengthens you. It reminds you that this season is temporary, that struggle is not final, that God still has the last word, even when it feels uncomfortable. Speak hope, speak trust, speak belief. Because silence can empower doubt, but faith-filled words keep you steady. God responds to faith, and faith is often spoken. So declare what you believe before you see it, because speaking victory prepares you to receive it. Thanking God in advance is the highest form of faith. It says, I trust you completely before the answer arrives, before the change happens, before the breakthrough shows. You thank God now because you know who He is, not because of what you see, but because of what He promised. And God never breaks His word. Advanced gratitude keeps your heart ready, your mind steady, your spirit hopeful. It prevents bitterness. It strengthens patience. It sustains belief. When you thank God early, you remove pressure from yourself. You stop forcing outcomes and start trusting process, because God is in control, not you. God will do it not because you're perfect, but because He's faithful, not because you deserve it, but because He promised it. And God honors His promises. You don't know how, you don't know when, but you know who, and that's enough. Faith doesn't need details, it needs trust. So thank God right now, in the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of waiting, in the middle of struggle, because God is already moving, and God will do it